Hey, good morning, guys. So today I want to talk about polishing brass. We're not going to get into all the scientific, physical, chemical compounds and breakdowns of that. We're just going to talk about polishing brass. So there's a couple of different types of brass. Like you got your brass bells, right? And then you've got cast brass. So some examples like this cover, right? This cover is a smooth brass, like a brass that can be polished. Whereas we take something like this old fire nozzle, right? It's cast brass, it's got divots in it, it's not finely done. This is something we don't want to polish. Someone has tried to polish this, I can tell because I can see the residue left over from the oxidization in the thing, but you don't need to polish things like this. Unless your chief mate or your captain's like, polish all the brass. Here in seamanship, you don't need to polish cast brass. It doesn't need to be done. We're just talking about things like bells, some handrails, we have some, deck covers and stuff like that we could do. Like we on our gypsy heads on our capstans, made of brass, don't need to be shined, right? Makes them super slick, slicker than we want them to be, right? We want to try to make that line grab, so we're not we're not shining our capstans and stuff. So there's a myriad. You ask deckhands, they have their favorites. I used to love Liberty Polish, which they don't make anymore. But you have Neverdal and Mothers and stuff like that. But it is important to know the difference between a metal cleaner and a metal polisher. So Temp, right? It's the enamel metal porcelain cleaner, right? This is for cleaning metals, right? Like if I had a cast bell or something that I wanted to take out something from, I would use some kind of metal cleaner. This is not a polish, it's abrasive. So if I put this on something nice and polished, it's gonna cause scratches in it because it's got something else in it that's kind of gritty. What we order in seamanship here is, we use good old fashioned Neverdal wadding, right? So paste, it just depends on what you are, but we use the wadding. So we'll talk some more about that in a minute. The other thing that's important is what kind of rag you're gonna use, what kind of thing you're gonna take that off with, or put it on with for that matter. Things with more cotton, right? Those work well. You know what doesn't work well? Denim, polyester, like full polyester, silk. Sometimes if you get those rags from the government, you can get different ones that are like all t-shirts and old sweatshirts that have more cotton in them. Or you can get old like dish towels or shop towels, those kind of things. Or you can get the ones that have like just fabric in them, like denim and stuff like that. This stuff sucks for trying to, or at least in my opinion, it sucks for trying to do brass. So you want to stick to the things that have more cotton in them. But yeah, and everybody has a preference. Like I said, what we get offered here, what we purchase here is the Neverdal, good old fashioned Neverdal. So let's talk about ways to polish and things to polish. Again, like I said, we don't need to polish cast brass, things like this. Unless that's your company's policy or your captain's like, super, we got to do that. Things like that we don't need to do. Nice smooth surface brass always looks good polished. So let me take a second here. I'm gonna switch this so we can pull a different view from you guys. Okay, and make sure I got this right. So, again, we won't talk about that right now. So I have, gloves are important to wear, right? Especially if you're sensitive to chemicals. So we're taking some of this Neverdal, right? So if you went to boot camp, I don't know how they taught you to do it, but they always taught us in boot camp when we did our boots to shine them in tight concentric circles, right? So I would spend some time in tight concentric circles working in an area, right? Letting that polish get in there nice and, right? Can get this edge like this. Maybe I can't do circles on that edge right there, but I could just start to do that. Now, some people's reaction, well, there's different theories for everyone. Some people are like, leave it on, let it dry in and take it off. The problem that I see in my seamanship program is they'll leave it on there and then it never gets taken off. So I'm a big proponent. That's how I would leave it on too, but I always came back and took it off. But most of my students will leave it on and then they never take off the polish, and it's got this white milky or kind of greenish milky leftover thing. You start to see black in your liquid there, that's this Neverdol, you know you're doing something right, you're pulling that out. So you can have 2 rags for this, but that's kind of luxurious to have 2 rags. Right? You take all that residue off, right? And I can still see that black under there. I like to have a couple of rags for doing this, right? One for the initial taking off of the polish, and the other one is for basically buffing it out, right? And sometimes brass is not going to be perfect on your first try. You know what? It might take layers and sometimes. We've taken old brass bells or pieces of brass that are real bad. We've put them in Coke overnight, right? Let them sit in Coca-Cola in like a 5-gallon bucket, and that'll take off a lot of that because Coke is acid basically. Sweet, wonderful acid, but yeah. And then just continue in your tight concentric circles to get that area that you want to go, okay? And then you get some of these like this where it gets real thick on there. You may have to get in there and really dig on it, or you can get like an old toothbrush, right? Especially like when you're getting into like crevices and stuff, or after it dries. When it dries and you've got that green leftover, oxidization or whatever it is that's on there, you might want to take a small toothbrush in and break out that stuff. So again, give it a second to dry, you know, get in there a little bit and take it off. And if you're lucky enough to have 2 rags, right? I'm still leaving residue with that, but I can come back with a new rag, a different one, and buff that out, right? And just continue to work. Just continue to work. You can see that there's that left over in there, right? This didn't even get all of it off. This is like an old sweatshirt, so it kind of sucks for doing it, but I can take and wipe off that excess first, as much as I can, and then use this to buff, right? And I'm just continuing to polish, right? I don't like what I see, I want more, so I'll start working watermarks, right? This is some real tough stuff. So let's say that I can't get this off, right? I might use this brush just to get some of that off. Okay, and then continue to work on it. Right? Sometimes if you're careful and you don't, your brass, like this brass is pretty beat up, right? It's had a lot of love to it. So I could probably take like a paint scraper or something thin like that, a razor blade, and just lift up whatever that is and get it off. But you know, brass. Some people really hate brass. I don't mind it, right? I like polishing brass. It's a good feeling afterwards after you get the brass all cleaned up, right? I don't recommend, I know I've seen people do like tape on brass. I don't really recommend that, but if that works for you, then go ahead and do that. So in just a couple of minutes, I mean, this brass was not completely terrible, but it was still dirty, right? So, and again, you can probably tell I use this for demonstrations anyways. The side doesn't ever get polished. So I'll take off that excess polish that's on there and this not so great rag. Right. I can come by with my better one, right? And I could just start to buff it out, right? And you just keep going until, right? Like you can see your teeth in there, or you can see the whites of your eyes, you know, depending on how tough your chief mate or your bosun is. But, and then obviously there's the cheating way, get a buffing wheel, right? Some people say if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, but we don't have buffing wheels for you to polish brass with. So you're gonna have to do it the old-fashioned way. Again, if you wanted to get in all these divots and that stuff, you wanted to try to get that all out, a toothbrush would work really well. I'm not gonna use this toothbrush part because it has temp on it, what I was using for another project. But again, if I want to get into those little divots, I can also spend a lot of time working on that, you know, trying to find the angles to get in there. And you can continue, just going over one spot. Some people, like I said, let it dry. I'm not a fan of that because I just know that we don't have a great track record of taking that dried off. And then again, with a different rag. I'll tell you another thing that I don't like, paper towels. Paper towels are not for shining brass. Well, maybe they are for you, but if we can avoid it, I don't want to find people shining brass with paper towels. Okay. Brass takes time, right? That brass has just started to looking nice, right? I can see a little bit of my face in there, more than I can see on this side. So I know that I've got a good base on it, and then I can just take the time. And here's where we might differ. This wadding, although it's black, still has a lot of chemical left in it. So if I'm not going back over something that's super nice, if I'm gonna go work on this, I'm just gonna put it back in there. It doesn't do any damage. I've been doing it for a long time. I haven't particularly had a problem with that. So I'm not gonna use it until, I'm gonna use it until there's no more life in it. But you can just come up with your own techniques and your own ideas for polishing brass. Let's see here. Sorry, guys. Anyway, so, you know, real quick tutorial, like on just, you know, just real quick. But polishing brass, if you get a chance, just be sure of your brass, right? Make sure it's real brass, not fake brass. Sometimes I've seen people take brass bells and then they dip them in some kind of clear coating. You're gonna rub that coating off. I think that looks hokey anyways. So if you could take 2 things or 3 things away from this, polish cast brass, things that are rough surfaces, that kind of stuff. So avoid doing that. Port lights, things like that on the ironwood don't need to be done. Fire stations don't need to be done. Maybe your valve, right? Maybe that if it's something that's on your boat for most of the time, yeah, you don't need to do that. Smooth brass, you know, you could even use the Mr. Miyagi wax on, wax off if you want in that method, right? Just to get your thing. And then just know what kind of chemical you're using, right? Are you using a polish? Are you using a cleaner, right? If it was a rough surf or a really tough and you needed to restore it, you could use some metal cleaner on that, but be careful if you're using things like temp because it's super scratchy, right? All right, guys, thanks a lot. Oh yeah, remember, safety first, your gloves too. Make sure you're wearing gloves when you're doing polish. You don't want to get that chemicals on you. It might be okay for you, it might not, but who wants to take a chance? Thanks, guys. Have a good Monday.